Welcome back to the deep dive, where we take these dense and often pretty impenetrable source documents and distill them into genuinely useful insights for you. Okay, let's unpack this one. Today we're looking at where project management, stops being a theoretical exercise and actually becomes contractual law. The document we have is an Employer Requirement Schedule Management Blueprint E3.2, and it's for a major high-value project. This isn't a suggestion, it's an absolute mandate.
Right. It supplements the general conditions of contract, and it tells the contractor exactly how they have to plan, track, and report.
So our mission is to understand the absolute rigor that's demanded here. This is the blueprint for total control, really, designed to ensure massive projects stay on time.
I think what's fascinating here is how clearly the document links time management directly to finance. The stated core purpose, and I'm quoting here, is that the contractor must carry out all required activities to optimize the feasibility and achievability of the key milestones that are described in the payment schedule.
That's the critical link. You're not just managing a timeline, you're managing the bank account.
Exactly. If the schedule slips, the cash flow stops. And that immediately elevates scheduling from, a technical detail to the central mechanism for risk and for payment control.
It really sets the tone perfectly.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into the first section, the foundational requirements and process. This thing demands integration and transparency right from the kickoff. So what are the non-negotiables that put the contractor on the hook?
Well, first and foremost, it's about accountability. The contractor is declared solely responsible for preparing and submitting complete and accurate information.
Solely responsible.
Yeah. So the liability for any data integrity issue, it rests 100% with them.
Okay, what's next?
Second, the employer wants to know the system, not just the result. So the contractor has to describe their entire schedule and progress management process. That includes the specific software they'll use in their Project Execution Plan, or PP.
And I saw that process has to be aligned with everything else.
Everything. It must be explicitly aligned with all the project disciplines, so engineering, procurement, finance, you name it.
So no siloed planning allowed. You can't have the engineering team using one set of assumptions and the construction team a completely different set.
Exactly.
And what does that integration lead to when they actually start building the schedule?
It leads to a requirement for an integrated initial program. And the complexity here is, well, it's intense.
I can imagine.
The plan has to coordinate all the internal activities, of course, but also all the interfaces with external stakeholders, subcontractors, third parties, and, crucially, all other contractors and suppliers that the employer representative has hired.
Wait, hold on. Let me unpack that for you listening. If the owner of the employer has separately hired a vendor to supply, say, a massive turbine, and that vendor is late, the prime contractor is contractually required to track and account for that external risk within their own schedule.
They absolutely are. It forces the prime contractor schedule to act as the single source of truth for the entire project ecosystem. It's a huge burden because it means they are responsible for monitoring and mitigating risk created by parties they don't even directly control. The schedule becomes a dynamic risk map, not just, a list of their internal tasks.
That dramatically increases the scope of work. Okay, moving on. Let's look at the actual deliverables, the digital package they have to submit. There are 6 critical ones listed. What are the highlights?
They really map the project journey. First, there's the schedule management process description in the PEP.
Right.
Then a formalized progress measure system, which has to be based on a work breakdown structure, or WBS.
We'll come back to that.
Third is the initial detailed time program and its supporting report. Then the monthly updated program, an analysis of actual versus planned performance, and finally, schedule recovery and delay mitigation measures if, delays occur.
Let's focus on that progress measure system in the WBS. For people new to contracting, what is the WBS and why is it so fundamental?
The work breakdown structure is the foundational framework. Think of it as a hierarchical map of the entire project scope.
Okay, a map.
It breaks the project down into manageable deliverables, ensuring that every dollar spent, every hour worked, and every activity scheduled is tied back to a specific, identifiable piece of the final product. Without a WBS, you really can't accurately measure progress or calculate earned value.
In that supporting report for the initial program, that demands more than just tables. It demands some very specific graphs, doesn't it?
It does. Specifically, resource tracking curves. They have to provide planned S-curves, both per discipline and overall, and also planned man-hour histograms and curves.
So why are these curves so important that they actually become contractual requirements?
Because they prevent what we call hockey stick reporting.
The hockey stick. Tell us more about that.
It's when a contractor reports, very slow progress for months, then suddenly claims a massive amount of progress in the final few weeks. So the cumulative progress curve looks like the blade of a hockey stick.
Right, I've seen that.
By mandating planned S-curves and detailed man-hour histograms right up front, the employer forces the contractor to prove that their resource plan is actually feasible and evenly distributed. You have to show you're dedicating the right manpower at the right time.
So if your actual S-curves deviates wildly from the planned one, it's an immediate red flag.
It is. The baseline becomes a test of engineering feasibility, not just a guess.
That makes sense. Okay, let's pivot into the next section, because it's not enough to hand over the methodology. The document dictates the level of detail the actual schedule must hit.
This is where we get into the level 4 schedule, and the granularity is extreme.
What exactly does level 4 mean in a high-stakes operational context? This isn't just a summary of phases, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. The document defines level 4 as a detailed deliverable schedule, complete with assigned resources and granular work activities. It's the lowest level of operational detail.
For day-to-day planning.
Exactly, for day-to-day planning, short-term look-aheads, monitoring and controlling the works. We're talking about thousands, maybe tens of thousands of activity lines.
And the program has to be presented as one integral Gantt chart. I counted 11 structural requirements. But focusing on the contractual impact, what are the elements that ensure the employer maintains total control over the project's flow?
The first one is that it must establish a closed network using interdependencies. And this directly prevents a practice known as float dumping.
And float dumping is when?
It's when a contractor links unrelated tasks together to hide the free time or float that they have available on non-critical activities. A closed network ensures all activities are logically linked back to the contractual milestones, so all the float is visible, trackable, and it can't be manipulated to hide inefficiency.
Okay, so total visibility on the Slack. What's the second big one?
The second, and this is perhaps the most defining requirement, is the mandated definition of the subcritical path. In this contract, the critical path is defined specifically as activities with a total float smaller than 2 weeks.
That's fascinating. They are imposing a hard contractual threshold for what constitutes a critical risk.
It's a huge shift. 2 weeks of float is the contractual trigger point. If an activity slips by even 15 days, it is contractually critical and requires immediate corrective action. This just tightens the leash on the contractor immensely.
And we established the link to cash flow earlier.
Yeah.
How is that enforced within the chart itself?
It's mandated. The Gantt chart must reflect the milestones exactly as they're described in the payment schedule.
So if there's a payment linked to substantial completion of foundation work,
that exact milestone has to be a named element in the Level 4 schedule. It ties the project manager's task list directly to the legal department's payment obligations.
and finally the technology. They aren't allowing spreadsheets here.
No, correct. The program must be set up in Primavera P6 or an improved equivalent. And the monthly submission isn't just a static PDF, it has to be submitted as a Primavera Exer file.
Why the demand for the native digital file? I mean, why isn't a high-quality PDF enough?
Because the employer representative doesn't want to just look at the data, they want to interrogate it. By getting the native Exer file, the employer can run their own risk simulations, check the logic links, verify resource loading, and make sure the contractor hasn't manipulated the sequencing.
It's total transparency. It enables an independent audit.
Exactly, and that ties directly into the resource loading requirement we mentioned. The Level 4 schedule has to be resource loaded with weighting factors so the employer can monitor progress, estimate the earned value status, and detect bottlenecks.
Okay, give us a quick, simple definition of earned value status in this context.
Earned value status is simply a measure of how much work you have actually completed versus how much you budgeted to spend on that completed work.
Got it.
If the schedule is properly resource loaded, the employer can use that data to instantly see if the project is behind schedule, over budget, or both, without just relying on the contractor's narrative.
So that level 4 detail ensures the baseline is robust and, more importantly, auditable. Okay, let's move into the final section, monthly reporting. Once the baseline is set, this monthly rhythm ensures constant risk management.
And the immediate demand here is about the speed of incorporating change. Any variations, so scope changes, and any effectuated mitigation measures must be processed immediately before the next progress report is submitted.
No delays in reporting change are acceptable.
None. So if they agree on a scope change on the 29th of the month, the report that's due on the 1st has to already reflect that change in the schedule.
Wow. Now, for the content of that report, every single month they require something called a red flag report.
Yes. The name sounds intimidating, and it kind of is.
What does it entail?
It specifically lists activities that have not yet started, even though the current date has already passed their baseline start date. But here's the critical part. Alongside each red flagged item, the contractor must include the proposed corrective action.
That's a massive contractual shift. It turns the report from just listing a problem into a mandated proactive planning exercise. You can't just wave a flag.
You have to present a solution. It forces ownership. The employer isn't interested in passive information. They want confirmation that the contractor has a plan to recover.
What other mandatory reports are in there?
A 2-month schedule look ahead, which has to be maintained at that level 4 detail, and also a milestone trend analysis, which tracks the trajectory of those payment milestones over time.
And I see they demand explicit confirmation on project health, too.
Absolutely. The report must contain an explicit description of the adequacy of buffers and float that are remaining with respect to delay risks.
So the contractor has to self-assess and explain what?
Essentially, they have to say, we have 25 days of buffer left, and we believe this is adequate to cover the current risks related to procurement. They have to constantly justify the remaining margin for error.
This level of documentation goes right down to the ground level, too. They're demanding site reports.
They are. The monthly submission requires supporting documents like daily site reports, detailing the direct and indirect manpower of both the contractor and their subcontractors.
Which allows the employer to cross-reference the claimed progress with the actual boots on the ground.
Precisely. And in a final check of legal status, they must also include a status listing of any extension of time claims, EOT claims, that have been submitted or are even just planned by the contractor. Full transparency, from daily headcount all the way to potential legal action.
So we've tracked this document from the foundational requirements through the really intensive level 4 planning and into this demanding monthly reporting cycle. What does this all mean for you trying to grasp how these massive projects are actually controlled?
Well, this deep dive shows us that high-value project management is not really about flexibility. It's about establishing a highly rigid, auditable system of control that is enforced through contractual and financial leverage.
The schedule is the legal language of the project.
It really is. By dictating the critical path, the software, the level of detail, and even the format of the correction reports, the employer forces the contractor to adopt the employer's definition of project reality and risk.
It's a remarkable illustration of how the contractual fine print maintains total control. I mean, if you're preparing for a major procurement or just trying to understand the incredible complexity involved, this blueprint is a masterclass in structured oversight.
And this raises an important question for you to consider. Given this highly specific definition of the critical path, that float of less than 2 weeks, and the mandate for detailed justification of all your assumptions like durations and sequencing, how does that contractual intensity influence the initial planning phase?
That's a great question.
Does the pressure to justify every single week of float make the planning more accurate? Or does it simply force planners to build in hidden conservatism somewhere else just to avoid hitting that contractual 2-week trigger?
A great final thought to chew on regarding risk and planning psychology. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the contractual blueprint for project schedules. We'll see you next time.